The storm had been raging for 3 days. Elara pressed her forehead against the cold stable door, her breath misting in the frigid air. Rain lashed against the wooden structure like 1,000 angry fists. And somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the mountains with a sound that made her bones ache. She shouldn't be here. She shouldn't be anywhere near the Blackthorn estate, with its towering iron gates and whispered warnings that kept even the bravest villagers at bay. But desperation had a way of making cowards out of the careful and forcing the broken into places they'd never dreamed of going. 3 days since Marcus found me. 3 days since I ran. Her hands trembled as she pulled the thin shawl tighter around her shoulders. It did nothing against the cold that had seeped into her bones, the kind of cold that came from sleeping on hay bales and rationing the last of her bread. The horses in their stalls barely acknowledged her anymore. She'd become just another shadow in their sanctuary. The cut on her cheek had finally stopped bleeding, but she could still taste copper when she swallowed. A parting gift from her stepbrother's ring when she'd refused his generous offer to marry his business associate. A man 3 times her age with hands that had wandered where they shouldn't, and a smile that promised nightmares. No. I'd rather die in this storm than go back. Elara wiped at her eyes roughly, angry at the tears that seemed to come unbidden these days. She'd always been stronger than this. Had to be, after her mother died and her father remarried that woman Victoria with her cruel mouth and crueler son. But strength had limits, and hers had been reached somewhere between Marcus's threats and the realization that no one was coming to save her. The stable door rattled violently, and Elara's heart lurched into her throat. Please, she whispered to no one. To the universe, to whatever God might be listening. Please, just let me rest. Just one night where I'm not afraid. The door didn't burst open. The night didn't answer. But something else did. The horses began to shift restlessly in their stalls, their ears pinned back. The largest stallion, a magnificent black beast that had ignored her completely until now, released a high, nervous whinny. The sound sent ice down Elara's spine. Something was wrong. She scrambled backward, pressing herself against the far wall of the stable, her eyes fixed on the main entrance. The wind had changed. The rain seemed to pause, as if the storm itself was holding its breath. Then she heard a sound that didn't belong to any storm. Low, guttural. A growl that resonated in her chest and made every primitive instinct in her body scream run. But there was nowhere to run. The side door, the one she'd been too afraid to lock, too afraid to make noise with, began to creak open. Slowly, deliberately. Elara's breath came in short, sharp gasps. Her vision blurred at the edges as panic threatened to overwhelm her. This was it. This was how she died, not at Marcus's hands, but torn apart by some wild animal drawn by the scent of easy prey. I'm sorry, Mama. I tried. The door swung wide, and her scream died in her throat. It wasn't an animal. It was a wolf. But not like any wolf she'd ever seen in the illustrated books from her father's library. This creature was massive, easily the size of the stallion in the first stall. Its fur was dark as midnight, sleek despite the rain that had clearly soaked it. But it was the eyes that held her frozen. Silver, like moonlight given form. And they were fixed directly on her. The wolf's lips pulled back from teeth that could easily snap her neck, and that growl rumbled through the stable again. But the animal didn't lunge, didn't attack. Instead, it limped, 3 steps into the stable, and Elara saw the blood, dark and slick, matting the fur on the creature's left flank. A wound that gaped open, revealing muscle and tissue that made her stomach turn. The wolf's legs buckled, and it collapsed onto the hay-strewn floor with a sound that was almost human. Elara's fear should have kept her pinned to the wall, should have sent her scrambling for any weapon, any escape route. But instead, she found herself moving forward. Oh God, she breathed. Her healer's instincts honed from years of caring for injured animals on their estate, overriding her terror. What happened to you? The wolf's eyes tracked her movement, but it didn't growl again. Up close, she could see its sides heaving, could hear the labored breathing that spoke of pain and exhaustion. Without thinking, she knelt beside the massive creature, her hands hovering over the wound. I need to. I have to stop the bleeding. Please don't bite me. As if in response, the wolf's eyes slid closed. Elara's hands shook as she tore strips from her already ragged dress, pressing them against the wound. The wolf's blood was hot against her cold fingers, and, for a moment, she felt something else, a pulse of energy that made her gasp, like touching lightning, like pressing her palm against a living flame. What are you? The question whispered through her mind, but she pushed it away. Right now, it didn't matter. Right now, this creature was dying, and she had a choice: let it happen, or try to save it. Her mother had always said Elara had healing hands, that she could calm the wildest animal, soothe the most frightened soul. It was why she'd spent so many hours in the estate stables, why the horses trusted her when they trusted no one else. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please stay with me. I've lost too much already." The wolf's breathing began to even out, but it didn't open its eyes. Elara worked through the night, tearing more fabric, applying pressure, whispering words of comfort that were as much for herself as for the creature bleeding beneath her hands. She didn't notice when the storm finally broke. Didn't notice when the first rays of dawn began to creep through the stable's cracks. She only noticed when the wolf began to change. The first thing Elara noticed was the heat. One moment, her hands were pressed against coarse fur and the slick warmth of blood. The next, the texture beneath her palms shifted, smoothing, warming, becoming something else entirely. The air around them began to shimmer like a mirage on a summer road, and that strange energy she'd felt before intensified until her skin tingled with it. "No," she breathed, trying to pull her hands back. "No, this isn't." But she couldn't move, couldn't look away. The wolf's body began to contort, bones shifting beneath skin, with sounds that made her stomach clench. The massive form began to shrink, fur receding like water being absorbed into sand. Elara's mind screamed at her to run, to flee this impossible thing happening before her eyes, but her body remained frozen in horrified fascination. When the transformation completed, a man lay where the wolf had been. A naked man, unconscious, with blood still seeping from a wound on his left side. Elara scrambled backward, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. Her back hit the stable wall hard enough to knock the breath from her lungs, but she barely felt it. Her entire world had just tilted on its axis, and nothing made sense anymore. This isn't real. I'm dreaming. I hit my head when I ran from Marcus, and this is all some fever dream. But the man groaned a distinctly human sound, and the wound on his side continued to bleed very real blood onto the hay beneath him. Elara's healer instincts warred with her terror. She'd spent the entire night trying to save this creature, and now he was going to die anyway if she didn't do something. "Damn it," she whispered, forcing herself to move forward on shaking legs. She couldn't look at his face, couldn't let herself acknowledge the man as anything more than another patient. Instead, she focused on the wound, tearing more strips from her dress. There was hardly anything left of it now, and pressing them firmly against his side. His skin was burning hot beneath her touch, fever warm and slick with sweat. The wound was deep, but not as deep as it had appeared when he was a wolf. Already, she could see the edges beginning to knit together, the bleeding slowing to a trickle. That's impossible. Wounds don't heal that fast. But then again, men didn't turn into wolves either. "What are you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the morning sounds of horses beginning to stir in their stalls. The man's eyes snapped open. Elara gasped, finding herself staring into those same silver eyes that had watched her in the darkness. But now, framed by a face that was all sharp angles and harsh beauty, they seemed even more inhuman, more knowing. "You stayed," he rasped, his voice like gravel and smoke. "You didn't run." Elara's words caught in her throat. "You were dying." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or confusion. His hand moved suddenly, catching her wrist in a grip that was gentle despite the obvious strength behind it. "You're hurt," she tried to pull away, but he held firm, his thumb brushing over the cut on her cheek with a tenderness that made her breath hitch. Those silver eyes darkened, and for a moment, she saw something wild flash behind them. The wolf, still there, just beneath the surface. "Who did this to you?" The question came out as a growl, and Elara felt the temperature in the stable seem to rise several degrees. "That's none of your concern," she managed, finally yanking her hand free. You need to stay still. That wound will be healed by sunset," he interrupted, pushing himself up into a sitting position with a wince. "My kind heals fast. His kind." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Elara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how exposed she was in the tattered remains of her dress, how vulnerable she'd made herself by helping him. "What are you?" she asked again, this time meeting his eyes directly. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. "What do you think I am?" "I think I just watched a man turn from a wolf," Elara said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I think I'm either losing my mind, or everything I've ever believed about the world is wrong." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Perhaps both." "That's not funny." "No," he agreed, the smile fading. "It's not." He shifted, wincing again, and Elara noticed how he was carefully angling his body to maintain some semblance of modesty. "There are clothes in the tack room. Third shelf from the bottom, behind the saddle soap." She blinked. "You've been here before." "I've been many places." He gestured toward the door. "Please, I'd rather not continue this conversation without pants." Despite everything, the fear, the confusion, the complete upending of reality, Elara felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in her throat. She swallowed it down and stood on shaky legs, moving toward the tack room. Sure enough, behind the saddle soap, she found a bundle of clothes wrapped in oilcloth. Men's clothes, well made and clean. When she returned, he had managed to pull himself into a more upright position, leaning against a support beam. She tossed the bundle to him, then turned her back to give him privacy, though why she bothered after everything she'd already seen, she couldn't say. "What's your name?" he asked as he dressed. She hesitated. Giving him her name felt dangerous somehow, like surrendering a piece of herself. But he'd already seen her at her most vulnerable. What was a name compared to that? "Elara," she said finally. "Elara Thorne." Thorne. Something in his voice changed, sharpened. "You're from the Thorne estate? 3 miles east of here?" Her blood ran cold. "How do you know that? You can turn around now." She did, finding him dressed in dark pants and a loose shirt that did nothing to hide the muscular frame beneath. He was tall. She hadn't realized just how tall until he stood, towering over her by nearly a foot. His hair was dark and wet, falling into those eerie silver eyes that seemed to see straight through her. "Answer my question," she demanded, trying to inject authority into her voice. "How do you know where I'm from?" "Because I know your stepbrother," he said quietly. "Marcus Thorne, and if you ran from him, you're either very brave or very foolish." Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. "You know Marcus?" "I know what he is." The man took a step closer, and she fought the urge to back away. "The better question is, does he know you're here? In Blackthorn territory?" "Blackthorn," she repeated, the name suddenly clicking into place. "The estate, the warnings, the stories about the reclusive family that lived here, the ones nobody ever saw. You're one of them, one of the Blackthorns." His jaw tightened. "Kael Blackthorn. And you, little healer, are in more danger than you realize." "I don't understand." Elara's voice came out smaller than she intended, the weight of Kael's words settling over her like a shroud. "What danger?" "Marcus doesn't even know I'm here. No one does." Kael's expression darkened, his silver eyes flickering toward the stable door, as if he could see through it to some distant threat. "You're bleeding, you're afraid, and you're on territory that's been claimed by my family for 300 years. Trust me, Elara Thorne people know." The way he said her name sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. Or perhaps everything to do with it, just a different kind than she was used to. "Then I'll leave," she said, lifting her chin, even as exhaustion made her legs tremble. "I didn't mean to trespass. I just needed—" Her voice cracked. "I just needed somewhere. Safe. Safe." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You chose to hide in the one place in this territory that even the monsters fear, and you call that safe?" "The monsters," she repeated slowly. "You mean, there are more like you?" Kael moved faster than she could track, suddenly close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. This close, she could see the inhuman quality of his eyes. Wasn't just the color, his pupils were slightly elongated, almost wolfish even in human form. "You're asking the wrong questions." "Then what should I be asking?" She refused to back down, refused to show the terror clawing at her insides. His gaze dropped to the cut on her cheek, and his jaw clenched so hard she heard his teeth grind. "You should be asking why a man who can transform into a predator capable of tearing you apart in seconds is more concerned about the bruise on your face than his own injury." Elara's breath caught. "Why?" "Because," he said softly, his hand rising as if to touch her cheek before he caught himself and dropped it. "You smell like jasmine and fear, and my wolf wants to hunt down whoever made you bleed and rip out their throat. The words should have terrified her. Instead, something warm and dangerous unfurled in her chest. Your wolf? The beast inside me. The one you saved last night when you should have run screaming. He turned away abruptly, raking a hand through his dark hair. You need to eat. Need proper clothes. Then we'll figure out what to do with you. I'm not a problem to be solved, Elara protested. No, Kael agreed, glancing back at her over his shoulder. You're a complication I don't need. But you're here now, and leaving you to Marcus's mercy isn't an option. You don't even know me. Why would you? Because you stayed. The words came out fierce, almost angry. You stayed with a dying wolf in a storm when any sane person would have fled. Because you used your own dress to bandage a creature that could have killed you. Because... He stopped himself, his hands curling into fists at his sides. Because I owe you a debt, and the Blackthorns always pay our debts. Before she could respond, he was moving toward the stable door. Stay here. Don't leave this building. I'll be back in 10 minutes. Wait. But he was already gone, slipping out into the gray morning light with a silence that seemed impossible for a man his size. Elara sank down onto a hay bale, her legs finally giving out. Her mind spun with questions, with impossibilities that had somehow become reality. Wolves that turned into men. Ancient families with claimed territories. And Kael Blackthorn, with his silver eyes and his talk of debts and beasts that wanted to hunt for her. This is insane. I should run. Should get as far from here as possible. But where would she go? Back to the Thorne estate, where Marcus waited with his threats and his business associates' lecherous smile. To the village, where everyone knew. Her stepmother had declared her a disgrace. Too willful and proud for any decent match? No. She had nowhere else to go. The horses had calmed now, their earlier nervousness replaced by the usual morning routine of shifting hooves and soft wickers. Elara stood and moved to the black stallion's stall, the one that had been so frightened last night. The horse regarded her with dark, intelligent eyes, then lowered its massive head, allowing her to stroke its velvet nose. You knew, she whispered. You knew what he was before I did. The stallion huffed warm breath against her palm. Kael returned exactly 10 minutes later, carrying a bundle wrapped in dark fabric. He'd changed clothes now, wearing fitted black pants and a shirt that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. The wound on his side seemed to have stopped bleeding entirely, and he moved without any sign of pain. Here, he said, thrusting the bundle at her. They belong to my sister. Should fit well enough. Elara took the bundle carefully, feeling the quality of the fabric through the wrapping. Your sister? Something shuddered in his expression. She doesn't need them anymore. The finality in his tone made it clear the subject was closed. Elara clutched the clothes to her chest. Is there somewhere I can? Tack room. I'll wait outside. She changed quickly, grateful to shed the ruined remains of her dress. The clothes were surprisingly practical, dark pants that hugged her legs, a soft white shirt, and a leather vest that laced up the front. Everything fit as if made for her. And she wondered about this sister who no longer needed such things. When she emerged, Kael was leaning against the stable's exterior wall, his face tilted toward the weak sunlight breaking through the clouds. He looked different in the daylight, younger than she'd first thought, perhaps only a few years older than her own 23. But there was something ancient in those eyes when he turned them on her, something that spoke of experiences far beyond his apparent age. Better, he said, his gaze sweeping over her in a way that made heat rise to her cheeks. Now you look less like a half-drowned refugee and more like someone who belongs here. But I don't belong here, Elara reminded him. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. Maybe not yet, but you will. Before she could ask what he meant, he pushed off the wall and started walking. Come. The main house is a quarter-mile through the woods. We need to get you fed and figure out our next move before... He stopped abruptly, his entire body going rigid. His head tilted, nostrils flaring as if scenting the air. Before what? Elara asked, anxiety spiking through her. Kael's eyes flashed silver, and when he spoke, his voice had taken on that inhuman quality again. Before they arrive, my brothers are coming, and they're going to have questions about why I've brought a human into our territory. Elara barely had time to process Kael's words before she heard them, footsteps that were too light, too synchronized to be human. Her heart hammered against her ribs as 3 figures emerged from the tree line, moving with the same predatory grace that Kael possessed. 2 men and a woman, all dark-haired and silver-eyed, all watching her with an intensity that made her want to hide behind Kael's broad frame. She resisted the urge, forcing herself to stand straight despite the trembling in her legs. Well, the woman said, her voice like honey laced with poison. She was beautiful in a dangerous way, sharp cheekbones, full lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The rumors are true. Our alpha has brought home a pet. Careful, Lyra, Kael warned, and Elara felt the air between them crackle with tension. The taller of the two men, broader even than Kael, with a scar running from his temple to his jaw, stepped forward. His silver eyes assessed Elara with calculating precision. She smells like blood. And fear. And like you, brother. His gaze shifted to Kael, one eyebrow raised. Want to explain that? She saved my life, Damon. Kael's voice was steady, but Elara noticed how he'd shifted slightly, placing himself between her and his siblings. I was injured. She found me and treated my wounds. So you revealed yourself to her? The third sibling spoke for the first time, younger than the others, with softer features, but the same predatory edge. Father's going to love this. Kael's jaw tightened. Father doesn't need to know. Not yet. Oh, this is rich. Lyra laughed, circling around them like a shark scenting blood. The great Kael Blackthorn, alpha heir to the Crescent Moon Pack, breaking the most sacred law of our kind. For what? A pretty human who stumbled into the wrong stable? Stop, Elara said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. All 4 sets of silver eyes turned to her, and she fought not to flinch under their collective gaze. I don't understand what's happening here, but I'm not some helpless thing that needs to be talked about like I'm not present. Silence fell over the group. Then Damon threw his head back and laughed, a booming sound that echoed through the trees. She's got fire, he said, grinning at Kael. I like her already. You're not supposed to like her, Lyra snapped. You're supposed to remember that humans are dangerous, that they hunt us, fear us, would see us all dead, if they knew what we were. I'm not going to hurt anyone, Elara protested. I just want… What? Lyra moved with inhuman speed, suddenly inches from Elara's face. What do you want, little human? To expose us? To run back to your village with tales of monsters in the woods? I want to be left alone. The words burst from Elara before she could stop them, years of suppressed fear and anger pouring out. I want to sleep without wondering if tonight's the night Marcus decides he's done asking permission. I want to stop running. I want her. Voice broke. I just want to be safe. The vulnerability in her confession seemed to shift something in the air. Lyra stepped back, her expression conflicted. The younger brother, whose name she still didn't know, looked uncomfortable, his gaze dropping to the ground. It was Damon who spoke next, his tone gentler than before. Who's Marcus? Her stepbrother, Kael answered, and there was murder in his voice. Marcus Thorne. All 3 siblings went very still. Thorne, Damon repeated slowly. As in the Thorne estate? The hunters? Hunters. The word sent ice through Elara's veins. What are you talking about? Your family, Lyra said, her earlier hostility replaced by something colder, more calculating. Your precious stepbrother and his mother. They're part of the organization that's been hunting shifters for generations. Elara's world tilted again. That's impossible. Marcus is… he's terrible, but he's not a monster hunter. That's insane. Is it? The younger brother moved forward, his silver eyes sad rather than hostile. Think about it. The late-night meetings, the locked rooms, the weapons. You've seen them, haven't you? She had. God help her, she had. The locked study that Victoria and Marcus spent hours in. The strange men who visited under cover of darkness. The time she'd glimpsed what looked like silver weapons mounted on the study wall before Marcus had caught her and threatened to break her fingers if she ever snooped again. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear. I didn't know what they were doing. But now you do, Lyra said, which makes you either an asset or a threat. She's neither, Kael growled, and Elara felt a strange warmth bloom in her chest at his immediate defense of her. She's under my protection now. Your protection? Lyra's laugh was bitter. Brother, you can barely protect yourself. Or have you forgotten why you were bleeding in that stable in the first place? Kael's hands clenched into fists. That's different. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're letting sentiment cloud your judgment. Again. Lyra's voice softened on the last word, heavy with meaning that Elara didn't understand. Enough, Damon commanded, and despite being younger than Lyra, his voice carried the weight of authority. Fighting among ourselves solves nothing. Kael's right, she saved his life. That creates a debt. And whatever else she may be, she's not responsible for her family's sins. Thank you, Elara breathed. Damon's smile was kind but sad. Don't thank me yet, little human. I'm Damon Blackthorn, by the way. This ray of sunshine is our sister Lyra, and the quiet one is our youngest brother, Asher. Asher nodded at her, still looking uncomfortable with the entire situation. The question now, Damon continued, is what we do with you. Because like it or not, you're in the middle of a war you didn't even know was being fought. War? Elara looked to Kael for explanation. His expression was grim. Between my kind and yours, between shifters and hunters, it's been going on for centuries, hidden in shadows and kept secret from ordinary humans. But lately, it's been escalating. And your stepbrother, Lyra added, her voice dripping with disdain, is one of their most promising recruits, which means he'll be looking for you. And when he finds you here, he won't find her, Kael said firmly. She stays with us, with me, until we figure out a permanent solution. Stay? Elara's voice was small. I mean you're not going back to that house, Kael said, turning to face her fully. Ever. Do you understand? She should have been terrified. Should have demanded to leave, to take her chances elsewhere. But as she looked into those strange silver eyes and saw the determination there, the promise of protection she'd been desperate for, she found herself nodding. I understand. Good, Kael said. Then, to his siblings, take her to the house, get her fed and settled. I need to run the perimeter, make sure we weren't followed. Kael, Elara started, suddenly not wanting him to leave. He paused, something softening in his expression. You'll be safe with them, I promise. I'll be back before dark. Then he was striding toward the trees, and Elara watched as he shifted mid-step bones rearranging, fur sprouting, until the man was gone and the massive black wolf stood in his place. He looked back at her once, those silver eyes holding hers, before disappearing into the forest. Come on, Asher said gently, offering her his arm. Let's get you inside before you collapse. You look like you haven't slept in days. She hadn't, but as she let him lead her toward the Blackthorn Manor, flanked by Damon and a still suspicious Lyra, Elara realized something that should have terrified her but didn't. She had just placed her life in the hands of monsters, and somehow, she'd never felt safer. The Blackthorn Manor rose from the forest like something out of a Gothic fairy tale, all stone and ivy, with windows that caught the morning light like watchful eyes. Elara had expected something dark and foreboding, but instead, the house felt oddly welcoming, as if it had been waiting for her. Inside was even more surprising. Rich wood paneling lined the walls, and sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating tapestries that depicted wolves running beneath full moons. A fire crackled in the massive stone hearth, and the scent of something cooking made Elara's empty stomach clench with sudden, desperate hunger. Sit, Damon commanded, gesturing to a chair near the fire. You're swaying on your feet. Elara wanted to protest, to maintain some dignity, but her legs gave out and she sank gratefully into the plush cushions. Warmth enveloped her, and she had to fight the urge to simply close her eyes and surrender to exhaustion. Lyra disappeared into what Elara assumed was the kitchen, while Asher busied himself stoking the fire. Damon settled into the chair across from her, studying her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. You really didn't know, he said finally. It wasn't a question. About the hunting? The shifters? Elara shook her head. I thought the stories were just that. Stories to keep children from wandering into the woods at night. Most humans do, Asher said softly, returning to lean against the mantel. It's safer that way, for everyone. Then why tell me? Why not just... She swallowed hard. Why not kill me to keep the secret? Because Kael claimed you, Lyra said, returning with a tray laden with bread, cheese, and what looked like venison stew. She set it down on the table beside Elara with more force than necessary. The moment he let you treat his wounds, the moment he shifted in front of you and didn't tear out your throat, he claimed you, whether he realizes it or not. I don't understand what that means. The three siblings exchanged glances, some silent, communication passing between them. It means, Damon said carefully, that you're under his protection now. Part of his responsibility. In our world, that's not something taken lightly. Elara's hands trembled as she reached for the bread. He said he owed me a debt. It's more than that, Asher murmured, then fell silent when Lyra shot him a warning look. Elara ate mechanically, barely tasting the food despite her hunger. Questions swirled through her mind, each one more impossible than the last. Finally, she couldn't hold them in any longer. What happened to him? Last night, I mean. That wound. She looked up at the three of them. What could hurt someone like you that badly? Another loaded silence. Then Lyra sighed, some of her hostility melting away. Silver. A silver blade, laced with wolfsbane. It's one of the few things that can cause lasting damage to our kind. The hunters use it, Damon added, his expression darkening. They've been getting bolder lately. More organized. There was an ambush 3 nights ago along the northern border. Kael was patrolling alone, stupid, reckless, and they caught him by surprise. He barely made it back, Asher said quietly. We thought he might not make it at all. Then he disappeared into that storm, and we couldn't track him, couldn't find him. Understanding dawned. The stable. He was trying to reach safety, but he collapsed. And you saved him? Lyra said, her silver eyes searching Elara's face. Why? When you saw what he was, why didn't you run? Elara thought back to that moment, the fear, the impossibility, the choice she'd made without really thinking. Because he was hurt. Because. She struggled to put it into words. Because, when I looked into his eyes, I didn't see a monster. I saw someone who needed help. Most humans see only the beast, Damon said softly. They see the teeth, the claws, the predator. They don't see the person inside. Maybe I'm not like most humans, Elara replied. Lyra laughed, but this time, there was warmth in it. No, I don't think you are. She settled into a chair, her posture relaxing slightly. All right, Elara Thorne. Since you're apparently going to be staying with us, there are things you need to understand. Rules. Rules? First, Lyra held up a finger. What you've seen, what you know now, it stays here. You breathe a word of this to anyone, and it won't just be you who suffers. Every shifter in this territory will be at risk. I understand, Elara said immediately. I won't tell anyone. I promise. Second, Damon continued, you don't leave the manor grounds without an escort. Not until we're sure Marcus and his people aren't actively hunting for you. And third, Asher added, his young face serious, you need to understand what Kael is, what it means that he's the alpha heir. Alpha heir, Elara repeated. Lyra mentioned that before. What does it mean? It means, a deep voice said from the doorway, that when my father dies, I'll lead the Crescent Moon Pack. All 200 shifters who call this territory home will look to me for protection, guidance, and justice. Elara's heart jumped at the sound of Kael's voice. He stood in the doorway, still in human form but with pine needles clinging to his dark hair and a wildness in his eyes that spoke of his recent run. His gaze found hers immediately, and something in her chest tightened. It means, he continued, walking into the room with that predatory grace, that every decision I make affects hundreds of lives, that I can't afford mistakes, can't afford weakness. Kael, Damon warned. But Kael kept his eyes on Elara. It means that bringing a human into our home, especially one connected to a family of hunters, is possibly the most dangerous thing I've ever done. The words should have hurt, but Elara heard what he wasn't saying, saw it in the way his hands clenched at his sides, in the conflict written across his face. Then why did you? She asked softly. He crossed the room until he stood before her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in them, the weight of responsibility that pressed down on shoulders too young to bear it. Because, he said, his voice rough, when I opened my eyes in that stable and saw you kneeling beside me covered in my blood, terrified but determined, something in me recognized you. My wolf knew you. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. And I don't know what that means yet, but I know I can't let anything happen to you. The room had gone very quiet. Elara could feel the others watching, could sense their shock and concern, but she couldn't look away from Kael. Your wolf knew me? She whispered. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, so gentle it made her ache. Do you believe in fate, Elara? I don't know what I believe anymore. Neither do I, he admitted. But I believe in debts, in honor, and I believe that you were meant to find me that night. Everything else. He let his hand drop, stepping back. Everything else we'll figure out as we go. Kael, Lyra said carefully, if Father finds out, let me worry about Father. Kael cut her off. though Elara saw a flash of something like fear cross his face. For now, Elara stays. She's under my protection, which makes her under pack protection. Anyone who challenges that challenges me. The declaration hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Damon and Asher nodded their acceptance, though Lyra still looked troubled. You should rest, Kael said to Elara, his voice softening. Asher will show you to a room. We'll talk more when you wake. Elara wanted to protest, wanted to demand more answers, but exhaustion was pulling at her like a riptide. She nodded, letting Asher help her to her feet. As he led her toward the stairs, she glanced back once. Kael stood by the fire, his siblings closing ranks around him, their voices low and urgent, but his eyes followed her until she disappeared from view. And Elara felt that strange warmth in her chest again, the feeling that somehow, impossibly, she'd found something she'd been searching for her entire life. The room Asher led her to was nothing like Elara had expected. Soft afternoon light filtered through gauzy curtains, illuminating walls painted a warm cream color. A massive bed dominated the space, piled high with quilts and pillows that looked impossibly inviting. Fresh flowers sat on the nightstand. Wild flowers, she realized, the kind that grew in the forest surrounding the estate. This was Kael's sister's room, Asher said quietly, lingering in the doorway. Sarah, she would have wanted you to use it. Elara turned to face him, hearing the past tense clearly. What happened to her? Pain flickered across Asher's young face. Hunters. 3 years ago. They caught her in the village, recognized what she was somehow. By the time we found her. He swallowed hard. Silver bullets. Even our healing couldn't save her from that much damage. I'm so sorry, Elara whispered, understanding now the weight behind Lyra's hostility, the shadows in Kael's eyes. It's why we're so careful now. Why Father made the rules about humans so strict. Asher managed a sad smile. Sira would have liked you, though. She always believed there were good humans out there, ones who could see past the monster, to the person underneath. She sounds like she was kind. She was the best of us, Asher said simply. Then, before the grief could overwhelm him, he straightened. There are clothes in the wardrobe, more of Sarah's things. Help yourself to anything you need. The bathroom is through that door. I'll have someone bring up hot water for a bath. Thank you, Asher. He paused at the threshold, glancing back. Kael's not usually like this, you know. Impulsive, reckless. He's always been the responsible one, the one who thinks everything through. But with you, he shook his head. I don't know what it is about you, but you've gotten under his skin in a way I've never seen before. Just be careful with him, okay? He may seem invincible, but he's more fragile than he lets on. Before Elara could respond, Asher was gone, closing the door softly behind him. She stood alone in the room that had belonged to a dead girl, a shifter killed by people who shared her blood, her name. The weight of it pressed down on her chest until she could barely breathe. What am I doing here? I'm one of them, a Thorne, a hunter's family. But she wasn't, not really. She'd never belonged to that family, never fit into Victoria's plans or Marcus's schemes. And now, standing in this room, filled with the ghost of someone who'd been murdered for being different, Elara made a choice. She wasn't going to be ashamed of seeking sanctuary, wasn't going to apologize for wanting to survive. Whatever her stepfamily was, whatever they'd done that wasn't her burden to carry. The bath, when it came, was heaven. Elara sank into the copper tub filled with steaming water, feeling 3 days of fear and filth wash away. She scrubbed until her skin was pink, then simply let herself float. Eyes closed, muscles finally relaxing. She must have dozed, because when she opened her eyes again, the water had cooled and the light outside had shifted to late afternoon. Elara climbed out, wrapping herself in a towel that was softer than anything she'd ever owned. The wardrobe held treasures, dresses, and deep jewel tones. Practical pants and shirts like the ones she'd worn earlier, even delicate nightgowns that made her blush. She chose a simple dress in forest green, soft and comfortable, that laced up the front. It fit perfectly, as if Sarah had been exactly her size, or as if it was meant for you, a traitorous voice whispered in her mind. Elara pushed the thought away and moved to the window. From here, she could see the forest stretching endlessly in all directions, dark pines mixed with deciduous trees just beginning to turn autumn colors. And there, at the edge of the tree line, stood a figure, Kael. Even from this distance, she recognized him, the breadth of his shoulders, the way he stood with military straightness, as if constantly on guard. He was staring into the woods, and something about his posture spoke of loneliness so profound it made her chest ache. Without thinking, Elara left the room and made her way downstairs. The house was quieter now, most of its occupants apparently elsewhere. She found a side door that led to a garden gone slightly wild, and beyond that, the edge of the forest where Kael stood. He turned as she approached, those silver eyes tracking her movement. "You should be resting." "I did rest," she said, stopping a few feet away. "Now I'm restless. Too many thoughts." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I know the feeling." They stood in silence for a moment, and Elara found herself studying him in the fading light. He looked different now, less wild, more human, but no less dangerous. There was a tiredness around his eyes that spoke of responsibilities too heavy, decisions too difficult. "Asher told me about Sierra," she said softly. Kael's expression shuddered. "Did he?" "I'm sorry. For what happened to her. For what the hunters did." "You're not responsible for their actions," Kael said, but his voice was tight. "Neither are you responsible for mine," Elara pointed out. "Yet you're protecting me. Why, Kael? Really why?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Do you know what imprinting is?" Elara shook her head. "It's rare. So rare that most shifters go their entire lives without experiencing it. But sometimes, very rarely, a shifter's wolf will recognize someone, know them on a level that transcends logic or reason." He turned to face her fully. "It's like every instinct you have suddenly aligns, around one person. Protecting them, being near them, ensuring their happiness becomes as vital as breathing." Her heart was hammering now. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying I don't know," Kael admitted, frustration bleeding into his voice. "I've never felt anything like this before. When I woke up in that stable and saw you, my wolf didn't see a human or a threat. It saw home, safety, something precious that needed to be protected at all costs." "That's impossible," Elara whispered, even as something in her chest sang at his words. "Is it? You're standing in a garden talking to a man who turns into a wolf." "Impossible seems to be relative lately." He took a step closer. "Tell me you don't feel it too. This pull between us." She wanted to deny it. Wanted to say she felt nothing. That her racing heart and the way her skin seemed to come alive when he was near meant nothing. But she'd never been good at lying. "I feel it," she admitted. "But I don't understand it. We barely know each other." "Some things don't require understanding," Kael said. "Some things just are." He reached out, and this time when his fingers brushed her cheek, Elara didn't pull away. His touch was warm, reverent, as if she were something precious and breakable. "You're afraid," he murmured, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "Of course I'm afraid. Of you, of this, of what it means. I would never hurt you, Elara. I would die before I let anyone hurt you." The intensity in his voice, the absolute conviction, should have been too much, should have sent her running. Instead, she found herself leaning into his touch, craving more of this connection that defied explanation. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now?" Kael's other hand came up to cup her face, and the tenderness in the gesture made her throat tight. "Now I teach you about my world. Now we figure out how to keep you safe from your stepbrother and his hunter friends. Now we—" A howl cut through the air, long and mournful, coming from somewhere deep in the forest. Kael went rigid, his hands dropping from her face as his entire body tensed. "What is it?" Elara asked, fear spiking through her. Another howl answered the first, then another, until the forest seemed alive with the sound. Kael's eyes had gone completely silver, that inhuman quality taking over. "A warning," he said, his voice rough. "Someone's crossed into our territory. Someone who doesn't belong. Hunters? Worse." He grabbed her hand, already pulling her back toward the house. "Your stepbrother. Marcus is here, Elara. And he's brought friends." The house erupted into controlled chaos. Within seconds of crossing the threshold, Elara found herself surrounded by shifters, some in human form, others mid-transformation, all moving with military precision. Damon appeared at Kael's side, his expression grim. "How many?" Kael demanded. 7, maybe 8. They're armed with silver and staying in formation." Damon's jaw clenched. "They know what they're doing, brother. These aren't amateurs." Lyra materialized from a side corridor, already dressed in dark tactical clothing. They're setting up at the eastern perimeter. If they breach that line, they'll have a direct path to the house. They won't breach it, Kael said with absolute authority. Then, to Elara, upstairs. Now. Lock yourself in Syrah's room and don't come out until I come for you. No. The word came out stronger than Elara intended. This is my fault. Marcus is here because of me. You should stay alive, Kael interrupted, his silver eyes blazing. Which means you stay hidden. Understand? Kael, I can't just hide while you... He grabbed her shoulders, not roughly but firmly enough to make her focus. Elara, if they capture you, this ends badly for everyone. Marcus will use you as leverage, or worse. I need you safe so I can focus on protecting my pack. He's right, Asher said, appearing beside them. Marcus won't leave without you. But if he doesn't know you're here, we can handle this diplomatically. Diplomatically? Elara's laugh was bitter. You don't know Marcus. He doesn't do diplomatic. Then we'll do it our way, Lyra said coldly, checking the silver blade at her hip. But you need to be hidden first. Elara looked at each of them, these people who barely knew her, but were willing to stand between her and danger. Her gaze finally settled on Kael, seeing the conflict written across his face. He wanted to protect her, but he also needed to protect his pack. She was forcing him to split his focus at the worst possible time. All right, she said quietly. I'll hide. But Kael... She grabbed his hand, squeezing tightly. Please be careful. Don't do anything reckless because of me. Something softened in his expression. Little healer, I've been reckless since the moment I met you. Too late to stop now. He pressed her hand to his chest, right over his heart. I'll come back for you, I promise. Then Asher was pulling her away, up the stairs and back to Syrah's room. He ushered her inside, then paused at the door. There's a panic room, he said, moving to the wardrobe and pressing something behind it. A section of the wall swung inward, revealing a small hidden space. If things go wrong, if you hear fighting, get close, you get in there and you don't come out until it's silent for at least an hour. Understood? Elara nodded, her throat too tight for words. Good. Asher tried for a smile but failed. Don't worry. Kael's the strongest alpha our pack has seen in generations. He won't let anything happen to you. Then he was gone, and Elara was alone with her fear and the distant sound of movement throughout the house. She moved to the window, careful to stay hidden behind the curtain. From here, she could see figures moving at the tree line, human-shaped, but carrying themselves with the confidence of predators. And there, at the center of them, she recognized Marcus's distinctive swagger even, from this distance. Her stepbrother had always been cruel, but seeing him here armed and hunting transformed him into something monstrous in her mind. How had she never seen it? The signs must have been there all along, but she'd been too caught up in her own survival to notice. A knock at the front door echoed through the house. Elara's breath caught. They were actually knocking? What kind of hunters knocked? She crept to her bedroom door, opening it just a crack so she could hear. Kael Blackthorn? Marcus's voice drifted up the stairs, smooth and dangerous. I believe we have some business to discuss. You're on private property. That was Kael, his voice carrying the weight of command. State your business and leave. My business is simple. I'm looking for someone. A young woman, actually. About this tall, brown hair, probably scared out of her mind. Marcus's footsteps echoed on the wooden floor they'd let him inside. Her name is Elara Thorne, my sister. She's not well. You understand. Prone to flights of fancy. We're very worried about her. No one by that name is here, Damon said firmly. Really? Because I tracked her to your stable 3 days ago. Found her dress, torn and bloody. Marcus's voice hardened. Now, I'm trying to be reasonable here, but if I find out you're harboring her, you'll what? Lyra's voice was pure ice. Threaten us? We're not afraid of you, Hunter. Silence, heavy and dangerous. Hunter, Marcus repeated slowly. Interesting word choice. Makes me wonder what else you might know that the average person wouldn't. Elara's blood ran cold. They'd revealed too much. Marcus was smart enough to read between the lines. This is your only warning, Kael said. Leave our territory. Now. Your sister isn't here, and even if she was, she wouldn't be going anywhere with you. My. Protective, aren't we? Marcus's laugh made Elara's skin crawl. Tell me, Blackthorn, what would make you so invested in protecting a human girl you claim not to know? I protect everyone in my territory from threats. You and your armed friends certainly qualify. Armed? Marcus's voice dripped with false innocence. We're merely taking precautions. These woods are dangerous, after all. All sorts of wild animals lurking about. The threat was barely veiled. Elara pressed her hand against her mouth to keep from crying out, to keep from running downstairs and surrendering herself just to end this tension. Your precautions aren't welcome here, Kael said. You have 60 seconds to turn around and walk out that door. 60 seconds before my family and I decide you're trespassing with hostile intent. Bold words. I wonder if you can back them up. Marcus paused. I know what you are, Blackthorn. I've known for months. Been building a file on your entire family, actually. Photos, witness statements, DNA evidence from incidents. One anonymous tip to the right authorities, and this whole estate gets raided. Elara's heart stopped. He had evidence? Proof that shifters existed? You're bluffing, Damon said, but Elara could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Am I? Want to test that theory? Marcus's footsteps moved toward the door. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to produce my sister unharmed and we're going to walk out of here. In exchange, I'll keep your little secret. Everyone wins. And if we refuse? Kael asked quietly. Then I make some calls. By morning, you'll have federal agents, military, news cameras, the whole circus. Your kind will be exposed, hunted, destroyed. All because you decided to protect one insignificant human girl. The words hit Elara like physical blows. One insignificant human girl. That's all she was, a pawn in a game between monsters. And now an entire pack of innocent people was at risk because she'd been selfish enough to seek shelter here. She couldn't let this happen. Couldn't let Kael sacrifice everything for her. Before she could talk herself out of it, Elara was moving down the hall, down the stairs, her heart hammering but her resolve firm. She could hear Asher calling her name behind her, but she didn't stop. She burst into the main room where they were all gathered, Kael and his siblings facing Marcus and 2 of his men. Every eye turned to her, and Elara saw Kael's face go through a dozen emotions in the span of a heartbeat. Shock, anger, fear, and something that looked like devastation. I'm here, she said, forcing her voice steady even as she trembled. I'm right here, Marcus. Let's just go. Leave these people alone. Elara? No. Kael started forward, but Marcus was faster. Her stepbrother grabbed her arm with bruising force, yanking her against him. She felt the press of something cold and metallic against her ribs, a gun. Good girl, Marcus murmured in her ear. Now we can all be civilized. Louder. To the room. See? Problem solved. We'll just be on our way. You're not taking her anywhere, Kael growled, and Elara saw his eyes flash completely silver, saw the beginning of his transformation ripple across his skin. Careful, Marcus warned, pressing the gun harder against Elara's side. Silver bullets. They work on humans too, you know. Would be a shame if my finger slipped. Kael, don't, Elara pleaded, meeting his wild eyes. Please. Just let us go. I'm not worth a war. You're worth everything, Kael said fiercely, and the raw emotion in his voice nearly broke her. Marcus laughed. Oh, this is rich. The big bad alpha has a crush on my pathetic little sister. This day just keeps getting better. He started backing toward the door, dragging Elara with him. Here's how this ends, Blackthorn. I take what's mine. You keep your mouth shut about what you are, and maybe I don't burn your whole world down. Sound fair? Nothing about this is fair, Damon snarled. Life rarely is. Marcus was at the door now, his men flanking him with weapons raised. Oh, and Blackthorn? If you even protection out, think about coming after her. If I see one wolf lurking around my property, I release everything. Every photo, every file, every piece of evidence. I'll make sure your kind becomes the most hunted species on the planet. Understood? Kael's hands were clenched so tight Elara could see blood dripping from where his nails, now claws, cut into his palms. But he didn't move. Couldn't move, not without risking everything. I'm sorry, Elara whispered, tears streaming down her face. Kael, I'm so sorry. Then Marcus was dragging her out into the night, and the last thing Elara saw was Kael's anguished face before the door slammed shut between them. The drive back to the Thorne estate felt like descending into hell. Marcus shoved Elara into the back of a black SUV, keeping the gun trained on her while one of his men drove. The other vehicles followed behind a convoy of hunters returning with their prize. She pressed herself against the far door, as far from Marcus as possible, while he watched her with cold satisfaction. "Did you really think you could run from me?" he asked conversationally, as if they were discussing the weather. "That I wouldn't find you?" Elara said nothing, staring out the window at the forest blurring past. Somewhere in those trees, Kael was probably tearing his house apart in rage, or maybe he was relieved she was gone, one complication removed from his life. "No, you saw his face. That wasn't relief. The Blackthorns, though," Marcus continued, shaking his head with mock admiration. "That was bold, even for you. Hiding with the animals themselves. Did you know what they were when you went there? Or was that just dumb luck?" "I didn't know anything," Elara said quietly. "I was just trying to survive." "Survive?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call whoring yourself out to monsters? Mother's going to love this. Her precious stepdaughter, consorting with beasts." "I didn't..." Elara bit off the denial. "What was the point?" Marcus believed what he wanted to believe. "Oh, don't worry. Your virtue or lack thereof isn't my concern." He leaned forward, his eyes glinting in the darkness. "What concerns me is what you've learned, what you've seen. Because if you breathe one word about the Blackthorns to anyone, Elara, I'll make sure you regret it." "I thought you were going to expose them anyway," she said. "With your evidence. That was a bluff, you idiot. I have suspicions, some grainy photos that could be anything, and a lot of circumstantial evidence. Nothing that would hold up to real scrutiny." He smiled coldly. "But they don't know that. And as long as they think I can destroy them, they'll stay away from you." Understanding dawned, bitter and painful. "You used me as bait. I used you as leverage. There's a difference." Marcus settled back in his seat. "The Blackthorns have been a thorn in our side, pun intended, for years. Untouchable, hiding behind their walls and their secrets. But everyone has a weakness. I just needed to find theirs." "So what now?" Elara asked, exhaustion making her voice flat. "You lock me up? Force me to marry your disgusting business associate? What's the endgame here, Marcus?" Now you behave. You smile. You do exactly what Mother and I tell you to do." His hand shot out, grabbing her chin roughly. "And you forget everything you saw at that estate. Forget those animals. Forget their faces, their names. Especially forget that lovesick alpha who looked at you like you were his whole world." The words sent pain lancing through Elara's chest, but she refused to let Marcus see it. She jerked her chin free, glaring at him with all the hatred she could muster. "I hate you," she whispered. "I know," Marcus replied pleasantly, "but hate me all you want from inside your room. You won't be leaving it for quite some time." True to his word, when they arrived at the Thorne estate, Marcus marched her straight to her room, the small, cramped space she'd occupied since her father's death, and locked her in. She heard him giving orders outside, posting guards, ensuring she had no avenue of escape. Elara sank onto her narrow bed, finally allowing herself to break down. Sobs racked her body, grief and fear and longing all tangled together. She'd been so close to something real, something good, had felt, for the first time in years, like she belonged somewhere, and she'd thrown it away to protect people she barely knew. No, not people you barely knew. Kael, you did it for Kael. Hours passed. The house fell silent around her as night deepened. Elara lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment with Kael. The way he'd looked at her, the gentleness of his touch, the promise in his voice when he'd said he would come back for her. But he couldn't come back. Not without risking everything: his pack, his family, his entire world. She'd made sure of that by surrendering herself. A soft, scratching sound pulled her from her. Thoughts. Elara sat up, listening. There it was again, coming from the window. Her window was on the second floor, far too high for anyone to reach without a ladder, unless they weren't entirely human. Her heart hammering, Elara crept to the window and carefully pulled back the curtain. Silver eyes gleamed in the darkness. A wolf smaller than Kael, with lighter fur, sat perched impossibly on the narrow ledge outside her window. It pawed at the glass, its meaning clear. Open the window. With shaking hands, Elara unlatched the window and pushed it open. Immediately, the wolf leaped inside, landing with perfect silence on her floor. The transformation was faster this time, and within seconds, Lyra stood before her in dark clothing, a pack slung over her shoulder. "We need to go," Lyra whispered urgently. "Now." "What? How did you? Marcus has guards everywhere. We're faster and quieter than humans. The guards never saw me. Lyra grabbed Elara's arm. Kael sent me. Well, technically Kael is currently destroying his training room and Damon sent me, but same difference. The point is, we're getting you out of here. No. Elara pulled her arm free. No, Lyra, you can't. If Marcus finds out, he'll expose all of you. He'll do nothing, Lyra interrupted fiercely. Because we're not leaving you here. Do you understand what you did tonight? Walking down those stairs? Surrendering yourself? Her silver eyes were bright with emotion. That was the most selfless, stupid, brave thing I've ever seen. And it made me realize something. What? That you're already Pack. Whether you're human or not. Whether you understand what that means or not. You're one of us now. And we don't abandon Pack. Lyra thrust the pack at her. Clothes, supplies, money. Enough to get you far away from here. But where would I go? Elara asked helplessly. Marcus will just hunt me down again. Not if we make it look like you never left. Lyra moved to Elara's bed, stuffing pillows under the blanket to create a vague human shape. It'll buy us a few hours at least. By the time they figure it out, you'll be long gone. This is insane. Welcome to life with shifters, Lyra said with a grim smile. Everything's insane. Now, are you coming willingly, or do I have to knock you out and carry you? Because I will. Kael's not the only stubborn one in the family. Elara looked at the pack in her hands, then at Lyra's determined face, then at the door that led back to Marcus's prison. The choice should have been harder, should have required more thought. But her decision was already made. I'm coming, she said, quickly pulling on warmer clothes. But Lyra, tell Kael I'm sorry. For putting him in this position, for complicating his life. Lyra's expression softened. He doesn't see you as a complication, Elara. He sees you as, she stopped herself, shaking her head. Never mind. You can tell him yourself once we get you somewhere safe. I can't come back to the estate. Marcus meant what he said about exposing. We're not going to the estate, Lyra interrupted. There's a cabin, deep in the territory, hidden from human eyes. You'll be safe there while we figure out what to do about your charming stepbrother. Before Elara could protest further, Lyra was pulling her toward the window. Hold on tight. This is going to be strange. What's going to be? But Lyra was already shifting, her body flowing from human to wolf mid-movement. She was slightly smaller than Kael in wolf form, her fur a striking silver gray that caught the moonlight. She knelt, clearly indicating Elara should climb on her back. You want me to ride you? Elara whispered, half horrified, half awed. The wolf Lyra huffed impatiently and pawed the ground. Right. Okay. This is happening. Elara strapped the pack to her back, then carefully climbed onto Lyra's back, gripping the thick fur tightly. The moment she was secure, Lyra launched through the window. They fell, for one terrifying heartbeat before Lyra's paws found purchase on the roof tiles. Then they were running, racing across rooftops, leaping impossible distances, moving with a speed and grace that stole Elara's breath. The estate grounds blurred past, and then they were in the forest, swallowed by darkness and trees. Elara buried her face in Lyra's fur, holding on for dear life as they ran deeper into the woods. Away from Marcus, away from prison, toward something she couldn't name but desperately needed, toward Kael. The cabin appeared like something from a dream or a fairy tale. Nestled in a clearing surrounded by ancient pines, it was small but sturdy, with smoke curling from a stone chimney. Warm light glowed from the windows, and as Lyra slowed to a stop, Elara slid from her back on trembling legs. The run had taken hours, or maybe minutes. Time had lost meaning as they'd raced through the forest. Elara's muscles ached, her hands were cramped from gripping Lyra's fur, and her deafened mind spun with adrenaline and disbelief. Lyra shifted back to human form, breathing hard but grinning. Not bad for your first wolf ride. I think I left my stomach about 3 miles back, Elara managed, her voice shaky. You'll get used to it. Lyra squeezed her shoulder, then gestured toward the cabin. Come on. He's been waiting. Elara's heart stuttered. He? But Lyra was already walking toward the door, and Elara had no choice but to follow. The moment they stepped inside, warmth enveloped her from the fire crackling in the hearth, from the cozy interior with its worn furniture and handmade quilts, and from the man who stood by the fireplace, his silver eyes finding hers immediately. Kael, she breathed. He crossed the room in 3 strides, and then his hands were cupping her face, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones as if confirming she was real. You're safe, he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank God you're safe." "I'm sorry," Elara whispered, tears spilling. "I'm so sorry. I thought if I went with him." "Shh." Kael pulled her against his chest, one hand cradling the back of her head. "You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing. Do you understand?" She shook her head against his shirt, breathing in his scent, pine and earth and something wild. "I put everyone at risk. I should have stayed hidden like you told me to. If you had stayed hidden, Marcus would have torn the house apart looking for you. Would have called in reinforcements." Kael pulled back just enough to look at her, his expression fierce. "What you did was brave, selfless, and completely terrifying to watch. I'll just leave you two alone," Lyra said with poorly concealed amusement, heading toward the door. "Try not to do anything I wouldn't do." "That leaves us a lot of options," Kael called after her, but his eyes never left Elara's face. The door closed, and they were alone. Elara became acutely aware of how close they were standing, of Kael's hands still, framing her face, of the intensity in his gaze. "You shouldn't have come for me," she said softly. "The risk was worth it. Will always be worth it." His thumb traced her lower lip, and Elara's breath hitched. "Do you know what it did to me, watching him drag you away? Knowing he had a gun pressed to your side and I couldn't do anything without getting you killed? Kael, I destroyed half my training room. Damon had to physically restrain me from going after you immediately." He leaned his forehead against hers, his breathing uneven. "Don't ever sacrifice yourself for me again. Promise me." "I can't promise that, Elara." "Because I'd do it again," she interrupted, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. "I'd do it 1,000 times if it meant keeping you and your family safe. That's what you do for people you—" She stopped, the word catching in her throat. "People you what?" Kael asked quietly, his eyes searching hers. "People you love." But she couldn't say that. Not when they'd known each other for mere days, not when everything was so complicated and impossible. Instead, she said, "People you care about." Something flickered in Kael's expression, disappointment, maybe, or understanding. He stepped back, putting space between them, and Elara immediately missed his warmth. "You should eat something," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "Rest. We have time to figure out our next move." "What next move is there?" Elara sank onto the worn couch, exhaustion crashing over her now that the adrenaline was fading. "Marcus knows about you. About your family. Even if he's bluffing about the evidence, he'll keep coming, keep threatening. I can't let that happen. So, what do you suggest?" Kael moved to the small kitchen area, pulling out bread and cheese. "That you go back to him? Let him lock you away or marry you off to some stranger?" "Of course not. But I can't stay here either. I'm a liability to your pack." "You're not a liability." Kael set the food on the table with more force than necessary. "You're—" "What?" Elara pressed when he fell silent. "What am I, Kael?" He turned to face her, and the raw emotion in his eyes stole her breath. "You're the first person in 3 years who's made me feel something other than grief and responsibility. You're the first woman who's looked at my wolf and seen beauty instead of a monster. He ran a hand through his dark hair, frustrated. "You're everything I didn't know I needed until you were kneeling in that stable, covered in my blood, refusing to leave me." The confession hung in the air between them, heavy and precious. "I was terrified," Elara admitted. "When you started to shift, I thought I was losing my mind. But then—" She stood, moving toward him slowly. "Then I looked into your eyes, and they were the same. The man and the wolf, both of you were there. Both of you needed help, and I couldn't walk away from that. Most people would have. I'm not most people." She was close enough now to see the silver flecks in his eyes, the tension in his jaw. "Just like you're not just an alpha or a shifter. You're Kael, someone who protects his family fiercely, someone who carries the weight of everyone's expectations but forgets to take care of himself. Someone who—" He kissed her. The movement was sudden but gentle, his lips capturing hers with a tenderness that made her knees weak. Elara's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and Kael's arms wrapped around her waist, lifting her until her toes barely touched the ground. The kiss was everything relief and desire, fear and hope, all the emotions they'd been dancing around since that night in the stable. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kael rested his forehead against hers again. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I shouldn't have—" "Don't you dare apologize." Elara's fingers tangled in his hair, keeping him close. Don't you dare." A slow smile spread across his face, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. It transformed him, making him look younger, less burdened. "You're dangerous, Elara Thorne." "So are you, Kael Blackthorn. We're quite a pair then." She laughed, the sound surprising them both. How long had it been since she'd laughed? Since she'd felt anything close to happiness? "Stay here tonight," Kael said, his thumb tracing circles on her lower back. "Let me keep you safe, just for tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out a plan. A real plan, one that doesn't involve you sacrificing yourself." "And what about Marcus? The threats?" "Let me worry about Marcus." Something hard and dangerous flashed in Kael's eyes. "Your stepbrother has made a critical mistake. He thinks he's hunting us, but he's forgotten what happens when you corner a predator." "What happens?" Kael's smile turned feral, his wolf rising to the surface. "It stops running and starts hunting back." The promise in his words should have frightened her. Instead, Elara felt something fierce and triumphant unfurl in her chest. For the first time since her father's death, she wasn't alone, wasn't helpless. She had an alpha at her back, and a pack willing to protect her. And Marcus Thorne was about to learn exactly what that meant. Night deepened around the cabin, and with it came a stillness that felt sacred. Kael had insisted Elara eat, watching with satisfaction as she consumed bread, cheese, and stew he'd somehow kept warm. Now they sat before the fire, the flames casting dancing shadows across the walls. "Tell me about your family," Elara said softly, curled into the corner of the couch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "Your real family, before everything." Kael was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old grief. "We were happy once. My father was different then, stern but fair, devoted to the pack. My mother was the heart of us all. She could make anyone feel welcomed, valued. What happened to her? Cancer. 8 years ago." His jaw tightened. "Even with our enhanced healing, some human diseases still touch us. She fought for 2 years before." He didn't finish the sentence. Elara's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. "I'm sorry. After she died, Father changed. Became harder, more focused on tradition, on the old ways. He saw threats everywhere, especially from humans." Kael's thumb traced patterns on her palm. "When Sarah was killed, it confirmed everything he'd feared. He wanted to isolate us completely, cut off all contact with the human world. But you didn't agree." "No. I still believe that hiding won't save us. The world is getting smaller. Technology makes it harder to keep secrets. Eventually, humans and shifters will have to find a way to coexist. Or," he trailed off, "or what? Or one side will destroy the other." He turned to look at her, firelight reflecting in his silver eyes. "That's why what Marcus is doing is so dangerous. He's not just hunting shifters, he's building a case for our extermination. Gathering evidence, recruiting allies, preparing for a war most humans don't even know exists." Elara's stomach churned with guilt. "And I'm his sister, his family. How can you even stand to look at me? Because you're nothing like him." Kael shifted closer, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. "You're nothing like any of them. You see the person first, the wolf second. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" "I see you," she whispered. "Just you. Not an alpha, not a shifter. Just Kael." His eyes darkened with emotion. "Elara, there's something you need to understand about shifters, about mates." Her heart stuttered at the word. "Mates? It's different from what humans call love, deeper, more primal." He seemed to be choosing his words carefully. "When a shifter finds their mate, their true mate, it's like recognizing something that's always belonged to you, a piece of your soul that's been missing." "That sounds like a fairy tale," Elara said, but her voice shook. "It is, and it isn't." Kael's hand slid into her hair, his touch reverent. "Some shifters never find their mate. They marry for duty, for alliance, for companionship, but every one of us carries this hope, this dream, that somewhere out there is the one person who will complete us. Why are you telling me this? Because my wolf knew you the moment I saw you in that stable, and every instinct I have is screaming that you're mine, my mate, my other half." His forehead touched hers, and she could feel him trembling with restrained emotion. "But you're human. You didn't choose this, and I won't trap you into something you don't want just because my wolf has decided you belong to me." Elara's mind spun. Mates. Destiny. A biological imperative that transcended choice. What does it mean, if we are? It means I'll spend the rest of my life protecting you, cherishing you. It means that when I close my eyes, I see your face. When I breathe, I search for your scent. It means, his voice broke. It means that watching Marcus take you nearly destroyed me, because every fiber of my being was screaming that I was letting my mate walk into danger. Tears streamed down Elara's face. Kael, I can't be what you need. I'm human. I'm weak. I come with enemies and complications and— You're perfect, he interrupted fiercely. You're brave and kind and strong in ways that have nothing to do with fangs or claws. You stayed with a dying wolf when anyone else would have fled. You surrendered yourself to save people you barely knew. If that's weakness, then give me weakness over strength any day. But what kind of life could we have? Your father would never approve. My pack will follow my lead. And my father? Kael's expression hardened. My father doesn't get to choose my mate. That's between my wolf, my heart, and you. This is insane, Elara whispered, but she was leaning into him. Her body betraying the truth her mind was struggling to accept. Completely insane, Kael agreed. He pulled back just enough to look at her properly. I'm not asking you to decide right now. I'm not asking you to accept a mate bond or commit to a world you barely understand. I'm just asking— He swallowed hard. Stay. Give us time. Let me show you what it could be like. What could be like? Us. Together. A life where you're not running or hiding or afraid. His thumb brushed away her tears. A life where you're treasured, protected, loved. The word hung between them, more powerful than any declaration. I'm scared, Elara admitted. Of this. Of what I feel for you. It's too much. Too fast. Kael kissed her again. Slower this time, achingly gentle. When he pulled back, his eyes held hers with unwavering intensity. I know. I'm scared too. Terrified, actually. Because losing you would break something in me that could never be repaired. You can't lose something you never really had. But I do have you, don't I? The vulnerability in his question made her chest ache. Tell me I'm not imagining this connection. Tell me you feel it too. I feel it, she confessed, her voice barely audible. God help me, I feel it. From that first moment in the stable, something in me recognized you. I thought I was going insane, that fear and exhaustion were making me delirious. But even now, even knowing everything I know, I can't imagine walking away from you. Relief flooded Kael's features. Then don't walk away. Fight for this fight for us the way I'm willing to fight for you. Against my family, against hunters and the threat of exposure, against the whole damn world if necessary. He stood, pulling her to her feet, keeping their hands clasped. Come here. I want to show you something. He led her to the window that overlooked the forest. Outside, the moon hung full and luminous, painting everything in silver, light. And there, at the tree line, Elara could see them dozens of wolves, sitting in silent vigil. Your pack, she breathed. Our pack, Kael corrected. They're here because word spread. Because Lyra told them what you did, how you sacrificed yourself to protect us. They're here to show their support, their acceptance. But I'm human. You're the woman their alpha has chosen. That's all that matters to them. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. See the gray one at the front? That's Damon. The silver is Lyra. And the young brown wolf is Asher. They're beautiful, Elara whispered, watching the wolves watch her. They're waiting for a signal from me. Waiting to know if they should pledge themselves to protecting you as one of our own. What signal? Kael turned her to face him, and she saw the question in his eyes before he spoke it. Accept my claim. Not as a mate, not yet, if you're not ready, but accept my protection. Let me claim you as pack, as family. It won't bind you to anything permanent, but it will tell everyone that you're under my shield. What do I have to do? He smiled softly. Trust me. Then he was leading her outside, into the moonlight, where the wolves waited. The cold air bit at Elara's skin, but Kael's warmth kept her grounded. They stopped at the cabin's edge, standing before the assembled pack. Kael raised his voice, speaking in a language Elara didn't understand but felt in her bones. The wolves responded with howls that rose to the moon, haunting and beautiful. Then Kael looked down at her. Last chance to run, little healer. Elara thought of everything that had led her here, every moment of fear and pain, every instance of feeling lost and alone. And she thought of how, in just a few days, this man and his family had made her feel more at home than she'd felt in years. "I'm not running," she said clearly. "Not anymore." Kael's smile could have lit the night. He pulled her close and kissed her forehead, then her lips, sealing something between them that felt ancient and unbreakable. The wolves howled their approval, and Elara finally understood. She wasn't just being protected, she was being welcomed home.